Welcome to today's episode of People and Strategy. I'm your host, Mo Fatalbab, President of International Facilitators Organization. People and Strategy is a podcast from the SHRM Executive Network, the premier network of executives in the field of human resources. Each week, we bring you in-depth conversations with the country's top HR executives and thought leaders. For today's conversation, you'll hear from a subject matter expert well-versed on the path to the boardroom. Enjoy this special recording. Welcome to today's webinar, The Path from HR to the Boardroom. I'm your moderator, Mo Fatalbab, President of International Facilitators Organization. Today, we'll be giving you a roadmap to help you on your path to the boardroom and offering guidance on how to become a boardroom-ready candidate. We're joined by Debra Boggs, CEO of D&S Executive Career Management, a firm that specializes in helping C-suite leaders land corporate board seats. Together, we'll explore how HR professionals and leaders can set themselves apart to be standout candidates for board seats. Let's get started. Welcome, Debra.
Thank you so much, Mo. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we are excited to have you. Let's kick off the discussion by talking about the big picture when it comes to board opportunities and the current regulatory environment for HR. Debra, what kinds of board opportunities are out there for first-time candidates?
Yeah, it's a question I get a lot because the candidates that we work with, if you haven't had to be in that realm, you don't know what opportunities are out there. And so when we're talking about board seats today, we're talking about corporate board seats with fiduciary responsibility, but there's actually a broad spectrum. So there's everything from nonprofit board seats that typically don't have fiduciary responsibility unless it's a large nonprofit or like a health system, things like that. Then there's board advisory seats, which we'll talk a little bit about. And those advisory seats are less formal. They don't have fiduciary responsibility. So there's not usually a formal process to bring an advisor on. And you may be part of a full board of advisors, or you may be the only one. That's usually a one-to-one agreement with the CEO or founder. Then there's the corporate board director for private companies. And this has a spectrum as well, because it could either be a family-owned business, a PE company where you're an independent director with the funders, things like that. There's, ESOPs and all sorts of other ways that a private company could have a board. Not all private companies have to have a board. So there's, varying opportunities there. And then certainly what most people think of is public company boards. And those are typically not an option for first-time board candidates. We have had a couple of clients make it, but it's after 30 years at C-level at Google, so that's a different level. But there is a range, and so when you're thinking about first time to the boardroom, you're really gonna think about advisory seats is a great path into those corporate board director roles in private companies.
And for those that are listening that are not really sure what a fiduciary is, please explain that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have financial responsibility for the health and sustainability of the business. So you're legally obligated to work on behalf of the business and make sure that it's that it's headed in a direction that's financially sound. And you're going to have personal insurance. They call it like D&O insurance for directors because if something were to happen, you're legally liable for that. And that's why these roles are typically paid, where I didn't mention advisory roles typically aren't. But once you take on that legal liability, there's usually pay for that.
Okay, thank you. And Debra, how can somebody tell if they are board ready or qualified for a corporate board seat?
Yeah, some of the things we think about when it comes to what makes someone board ready or a qualified board candidate are, it really helps to have had a C-level title. If you don't have a C-level title, so if you haven't made it to CHRO yet, maybe you're a VP or something, then the other side is needing either deep industry experience or deep functional expertise in something that the company's about to go through. Maybe it's, a big round of M&A. Maybe there's some sort of, you've taken a company through IPO, whatever that is, right? There's also, it's a great opportunity for people that are more seasoned to move into areas of their career because they're expecting at least 20 years of experience. And when I say 20, that's pretty much on the low end. We're really looking 25, 30, really, unless, again, advisory seats are different. So as you promote yourself and you're thinking about board resumes and things, which we'll talk about later, the You don't have to hide your age because they're expecting you to come with a wealth of experience. And then we're going to need deep industry experience or functional expertise. Like we said, we also need to understand corporate governance, and that's something that you can get. We'll talk a little bit more about later in the program, but really having an understanding of the role of the board is really important.
Yeah. And for our HR audience, what are the big regulatory changes that have impacted HR's path to the boardroom in recent months?
Yeah, such a great question, and something we've been keeping really close track of because, as you can imagine, things have changed a lot. We give a presentation like this pretty often, and when we're presenting to organizations like the New York Stock Exchange and things like this, the regulatory environment is changing all the time, right? And so what we were seeing prior to 2024-ish was a swing toward bringing more culture and talent leaders to the table, because we were really focused on more inclusivity, more diversity programs. Companies were required to report on their diversity at the board level, and so because of that, we had a lot bigger focus on these kinds of cultural aspects of the business, so that obviously HR is well positioned to support. Having said that, starting in 2025, a lot of those things went away, and then here recently, the requirements for boards at the public level to report on their diversity, equity, and inclusion is now optional, and most companies have opted out. So because of that, what's going on? Generally, I have some data I could share with you, but actually, we put a lot of the data in a article we wrote for the SHRM Executive Network recently. So we can pop that in the chat. But what that means is there are less room for CHROs at the table who are traditional CHROs, who are leading with just their people and culture and talent development. And we're going to talk about how to land your seat at the table in a different way then, because right now, what you traditionally lean on is less desirable in this moment.
Okay. So that begs the question, what specific skills do corporate boards look for in a candidate right now?
Yeah, so I don't want to be all doom and gloom, right? CHROs in the room and HR leaders have incredible value to add to the boardroom. We just have to change how we're positioning ourselves, right? We have to shift the narrative that we are people and talent development and culture leaders to we are business first executives who are leading the talent transformation that companies have to address things like AI, cybersecurity, all of these areas where we have to upskill, we have to reskill, we have to hire for different skills, we have to roll out major training programs, huge change management initiatives companies are facing right now at the board level and down. And who better to address those things than an HR leader, right? That's what you're tasked with doing anyway, and no one else can do it like you can. And so shifting the narrative to being more competitive in an uncertain future, in the risk mitigation, that's another area where CHROs and HR leaders are incredible at risk mitigation. It's most of your job, but you don't talk about it when you're thinking about the boardroom. And right now, that's a major area of governance that is high on the radar.
The regulatory landscape won't simplify while you wait, and every week without a clear I&D strategy is a week of legal exposure and missed performance. SHRM Blueprint for I&D, part of All Things Work 2026, is built to close that gap fast. Early bird pricing ends August 28th, so the cost of delay climbs by the day. Register now at shrm.org/blueprint26-earlybird. That's shrm.org/blueprint26-earlybird.
So what's the first thing that our audience should do if they want to start a search for a board seat?
Yeah, so I talk to board candidates every day, all over the country. And what people typically say to me when I say, okay, what does an ideal board look like for you? The answer is, well, I've led HR or I've led companies, or I've done this for these kinds of companies and those kinds of companies, but really what I do can translate to any company, and I've got 30 years of experience, so I can help any company from the board perspective. The problem is any company doesn't care. And just like you all in your companies are hiring specialists to solve for specific challenges, that's what's happening in the boardroom right now. Boards and nom-gov committees and board chairs are looking for specific leaders who can come in and help them through a specific inflection point or something. And so we need to get really clear about the value that we bring. And to do that, the most important thing you need to start with is having a clear focus, really understanding what kinds of companies you're uniquely equipped to serve will help you tell a much stronger story, which I know we'll get into in the framework. But it's the part that most people skip. They go straight to writing a board resume or telling their network they're open to board opportunities or joining a board governance program, training program, without a direction. And that's really the most critical part to success.
Yeah. So, and Debra, as you know, there are few boardroom seats. So anything you could do to stand out is essential. So let's dive into how to be candidate ready. And you've alluded to a couple of these things already, but I think we're going to be doubling down and adding to this amazing list. So how should HR leaders frame their skills and experience to stand out right now?
Yeah, so it's an easy process as far as a framework goes. It's hard to physically do. It'll take some time for you all to think about, but it's an easy framework. And I want you to think about it's 3 steps to really building a unique value that will resonate in the boardroom for CHROs and HR leaders. And so it starts with getting clear about your focus, right? That's that number 1 tip I said everyone has to start with. That's how the framework starts too, is what does our ideal company look like? And I want you to get as specific as possible, thinking about the industry, thinking about the type of company, the size of the company, the maturity stage. Is it private or public? Like I said, most first-time board candidates will look at a private company, but then is it PE-backed or family-owned or privately founder-led or whatever it may be, an ESOP? Because all of these kinds of companies have different challenges. And then that's the next thing I want you to think about. So point 2 is, what are the challenges this kind of company is facing right now? From a regulatory standpoint, from a market standpoint, from a macroeconomic standpoint, like what's going on for that company? What are they trying to do? From a technology standpoint, how is AI impacting the company? Thinking about your ideal company profile and then what the challenges are they're facing will help you build a unique value statement that really speaks to that and really helps you stand out. Because what we often hear from people is, I'm an HR leader with 20 years of experience in a variety of industries. That's not helping anyone stand out. In fact, I'm going to guess almost everyone on this call is an HR leader with 20 years of experience in a variety of industries or companies, right? That's everybody. So instead, it's really thinking about, if you have the focus of the company and then the challenges, how are you uniquely equipped from a governance perspective, which we'll dig into, to help companies solve for these challenges, right? And from a governance perspective, that is thinking about the broad level strategy of the company, of how they're going to reskill, retool, drive change within their workforce, how they're going to address, regulatory changes that maybe change the way they do business, how maybe they're entering new markets and you've done that in the past. Maybe they're, trying to ramp up or maybe ramp down. Maybe it's divestiture. Have you done any integrations or any spin-offs, stuff like that? Again, the risk mitigation piece is so incredibly important. CEO succession, all of these things are skills that matter to the boardroom that you have likely, and thinking about, okay, so then you can say, I am a senior HR leader, serving these kinds of companies, and from a board perspective, they would bring me in when they're facing XYZ, right? And that way you can have something really clear to share with people about who you are, who you serve, and what you do differently in a way that is short and impactful.
Okay. So what am I really, really wanting to focus on, and what companies are good candidates for that? Right?
Yes.
What are the challenges those companies are facing right now?
Mm-hmm.
And how will I use my unique talents and skills to help them meet those challenges? That's
exactly.
it?
Exactly.
Okay. So once they know their value, what do HR leaders need to do to start their search?
Yeah. So once you have your value, a couple of things. One of those things is, don't wait for it to be perfect to get out there and start telling people you're open for opportunities. And shifting the narrative from, I'm looking for my first board seat, to, I have capacity to serve on a board, right? Or I have capacity to add to my portfolio, and I'm looking to serve a company that wants to do XYZ, or a company like this. So having those conversations and letting people know in your network what you're interested in, what you're looking for, and being really clear and having a call to action about that is really helpful, because then, asking for people to open doors, who should I know? Do you mind introducing me to so-and-so? Because these board seats are not typically going to be found on a job board, right? That most people don't put board roles online. Most first-time board candidates are not going to get placed by a board-level recruiter, because just like in the candidate space, recruiters can't place out-of-box candidates, right? They have to have an apples-to-apples candidate. And so you're going to have to find it through your network. And networking is going to be an active process where we have to be a little bit more bold than sometimes we typically are, especially in HR, of being able to ask that call to action at the end. Not just here's what I'm looking for, but and can you introduce me to Jim? And, and here's my, like, putting yourself out there a little more forwardly is the piece where I see a lot of people stumble. That is really the important first step.
Okay. I think that is really good stuff. So what are some tips you might give for networking? Because that seems like an important part in doing this.
It is. It's such an important part. And I hear from candidates all the time that say, I don't have the right network for this. My network can't get me on a board. My network isn't going to be able to open these doors for me because I've been maybe heads down in my company doing my work, or I've been heads down in my industry just, building my career, but I haven't looked outside very much. And that's okay. I want everyone to know that it's okay if you don't have the network you need right this second. And we can do that strategically. There's a couple of ways that you want to think about building your network. And it starts with, if you have that clear direction, if you have that clear focus for your search, then that's really the starting point for everything that you're going to do. Because, one thing we didn't talk about, but a board candidate should have a board resume and a board bio and a LinkedIn profile that all point to where you're headed and not everywhere you've ever been. So we can talk a little bit more about those things, but those are the, once you have a focus, you can really write your documents directly towards that focus. And your LinkedIn profile, it really should be saying where you're headed. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about executive visibility. But then we also want to look at what rooms do you need to be in to meet the people who can open the doors, right? What rooms are current board members in? What rooms are senior leaders at your ideal company in? And this means networking maybe outside of just the HR realm. And how are you getting into rooms with broader C-suite and board level leaders? Is it joining board level organizations? Is it looking at your industry and seeing, okay, what events and things do I need to be in? So I want you to think about not just having virtual coffees with everyone you know, but what rooms do you need to be in? And then asking the questions of, who else should I know? And that will help you build that network in the space that you want to head.
Who else should I know is a great question. But I want to ask you something else. As it relates to your LinkedIn profile, it should speak to where you're going, not where you've been. Can you help us kind of thread that needle? Because I think so many of us want to count on, well, here's my experience and here's what I've done. And you're saying something completely opposite. So please unpack that for us.
I am. So when we're working with a candidate to build a LinkedIn profile, we look at it from three lenses, right? So for the candidates that we work with, we also, we help with the positioning, but we will physically do this too. And so this is a bigger process than just adding everything you've ever done, right? And the couple of things I want you all to think about. Your LinkedIn profile it needs to be built from three lenses. It's the content that communicates who you are and where you're going, right? Which is kind of what you mentioned about, it's not just a list of everything you've done, but in that about section, in that headline, which is your prime real estate on your profile, by the way. Everyone sees when you comment on things on LinkedIn, when you come up in searches, your headline follows you everywhere. It's really important real estate to add what you're looking for or what you're qualified to do or where you're headed next. But so it's the content. It's also the optimization, making sure you're showing up in potential searches for people like you. I know a room full of HR leaders understand the optimization part and how important that is, but I want you to think about it for you as a candidate, right? If someone's looking for a senior leader in that industry, how are you showing up in the way that you've built your profile to make sure that it's optimized to be found by the people you want to be found for, not just the way you're looking when you're looking for candidates, maybe. And then the third thing that is so important for board candidates that I see missed a lot, but is absolutely critical, is the executive visibility of your profile. What is your profile saying about you visually? Are you a leader in your industry, or do you have almost nothing on the profile? And the way to think about this is, a LinkedIn banner that's not just the LinkedIn blue. So literally anything else is better. A headshot that looks like you do today, that looks like you would walk into an interview live or on video, that looks exactly like that, right? So if we have a photo that we really like, but it's from 20 years ago, that is not serving you. So get a profile photo that is up to date, that looks like you, because you now are playing at a different level. You want to be found for a board seat, or you want to be, this is going to be your first impression, just like it is for your candidates when you're, interviewing people. It's doing the same thing for you. And we want that first impression. We want to manage that and make it look as much like us as possible. And then finally, you want a featured section and links and images throughout your profile. That featured section can be anything. It can be posts. It can be different things about your company. It can be speaking events. It can be events the company hosted. It doesn't matter. What it's showing is a little bit more visual interest about how you show up in the world as a leader. So all of these things together make a robust profile, and that is much more important than making sure every bullet in your resume is perfect.
The clock is ticking. Early bird pricing on the SHRM Certified Professional and SHRM Senior Certified Professional certification ends August 31st. Register now and use promo code SUMMER26 to save an additional 25%. This is your moment to stand out, prove your expertise, and take the next big step in HR. Don't wait until it's too late. Head to shrm.org/certification and lock in your savings today.
Okay, so next we're going to review some common scenarios for being boardroom ready and offer some practical guidance. So Debra, what are some common mistakes you see candidates make that are easily avoided?
Yeah, so some common mistakes. A couple of things. The biggest mistake I see, beyond not having a focus, which is the biggest one, is that they try to be all things to all people. So not just not having a focus, but having too many focuses. So, I was talking to a board candidate the other day who said he wanted to work in, or he was equally qualified to serve in real estate or ad tech companies. Those are two totally different companies with different market challenges, with different processes for boards, all of these things like that. You can't build a unique value statement or a search strategy or a compelling LinkedIn profile if you're trying to be all of these things. We had a candidate who had sat on a public board, actually, but couldn't find her second public board. She had rolled off and was looking for the next thing and could not get a board seat to save her life. And she said, I don't know why, I'm obviously qualified. And she was deeply experienced in a lot of different industries. She had a fascinating career globally, did all sorts of things in all different industries, had held several C-level titles, spoke 7 languages or something. It was crazy. But she was sharing all of this and people had no idea what to do with her. Right. People had no idea what box she fit in. Is she agriculture? Is she banking? Is she manufacturing? Because it was all over the place. And I said, we have to pick a lane and communicate one thing. Like what is that one thing? And anyway, working together, we really refined her. She's the same leader. It's changing the packaging, right? And she got 3 board seats and she's doing great now. But it's really focusing your narrative and not trying to, I think people are worried about, narrowing too many and then missing opportunities. But if you're trying to cast too wide of a net, no one understands what to do. Great example. Thank you. What about having a certification for corporate governance? Is that helpful? So this is a question I get a lot because board candidates, and especially if they're CHROs or our general counsel clients that we work with, or some of these candidates that end up, certifications are a big part of your work, feel that they need a certification to be board qualified. And here's what I will say. It's not a prerequisite to get a board role. It's not necessarily something that you have to be a qualified board candidate or at all, really. But a board certification does a couple of things. If you want a general governance board certification, it gives you the language you need. It gives you a better understanding of how the board operates. It helps you prepare for interviews by understanding things like what does fiduciary responsibility actually mean in practice, things like this, committee structure, all of that, the role of a board director. Do you need to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on that? No. So one program that is inexpensive, Private Directors Association has a great program, inexpensive, versus say NACD, which also has a great program, but do you need that because it's more focused on public boards? So when we're thinking our first board seat, is that something you need? There are really great options through most of the Ivy League colleges as well. So like Harvard has a great program, Wharton has a great program. Do you need that to be board ready? No. What you do get with that is the network. And so thinking about your motivations for going through these programs help too. Now, what I will say is what is helpful, and especially for CHROs, because you have to lead with something beyond, say, just your HR experience, are the certifications or training coming up now for board members as it relates to cybersecurity and AI. Because those are the two things that every board member right this second is expected to have a base level understanding of, and showing that you have done that and you understand the role of the board as it relates to risk mitigation and opportunity and all of that from a board perspective for AI and cybersecurity is going to be a differentiator for you and usually lower cost.
Okay. No surprise there, especially as it relates to AI, of course, the big buzzword of the day. For the last
it really is.
Yeah. Okay. So how should someone raise their executive visibility if they've been heads down, working, doing their work and not out front? How do you start growing your professional brand when you've been really just focused in?
Yeah, this is so interesting because it happens so often. You're doing your work, you're building a great reputation internally, but there's an executive recruiter I'm close friends with who says no one's going to pluck you out of obscurity, right? And it's so true, and especially in the board space, you're not going to get plucked out of obscurity. You really need to put yourself out there front and center in a way that is sometimes uncomfortable for people, and especially if you're promoting yourself and not your business, right? And so a couple of ways to think about this is, number one, all the things we talked about in LinkedIn, that's baseline. You just need that. You have to have that. But then thinking about how can you demonstrate your thought leadership in a space. You may not have, thousands of followers and things like this, but how can you demonstrate and show when someone is looking you up, what shows up in Google, what shows up on your LinkedIn profile, what can you speak to as far as what you've been doing in the industry? And some of these things are certainly speaking engagements, even if they're local at networking events that you have locally, anything where you can show that, you've been speaking on different topics. Podcasts are a really great opportunity. An easy way to get some podcast experience, even if they're not, hugely popular podcasts, are a platform like Podmatch is a great one to match you with podcasts that are looking for leaders like you to talk about whatever the topic is. It's a pretty low cost, low lift way to get a couple of podcasts under your belt. Or certainly if you know someone that has a podcast pitching something. But again, you have to have a clear focus that you're going to talk about so that you're a valuable guest on their podcast for their audience, right? But some of those things are helpful. A LinkedIn newsletter is a really easy, low lift way to build a newsletter. It's I think free with premium. You're not spending anything. It goes out not only as a LinkedIn post, but it also gets emailed to everyone that subscribes. And so that's a great way just to have your name come up. And they are also searchable on Google. So those LinkedIn newsletters come up in Google searches about you. So if you don't want to build maybe a whole, is MailChimp still a thing? I'm not even sure. Like HubSpot, whatever you're going to do, you can do it through LinkedIn. And that's an easier low lift way to do it as well.
Great. And Debra, where can HR find webcasts or materials focused on business acumen, strategic advising, and influence for leaders preparing for board level roles?
Yeah, a couple of things that I really like. Spencer Stewart has a really great newsletter. They put, and I know this is an HR group, they put amazing content out on the hiring landscape right now up to the board level. So I really like that one. BDO has their board governance practice has really great content that is free, that they really do a lot of surveys on. Right now they're doing a public company board survey they'll put out in a couple of months. They do a lot of research around what's going on in the boardroom that is all free if you subscribe. McKinsey has a great knowledge base that really helps at the highest levels understanding what's going on in the boardroom. PDA, as I mentioned, the Private Directors Association, puts out great for their members. It is low cost, but they put out great webinars and updates on what's going on. And then from the candidate perspective, shameless plug, I have a YouTube channel and a LinkedIn profile, and we share a ton of free content around the journey to the boardroom, how to navigate board level interviews, things like that, which Carmen Poff on my team can pop in the chat as well if anyone wants to dig into some of that.
Great, great, great. Thank you so much. So, at SHRM, we've received several questions from our members about this topic and our Knowledge Center advisors. And we want to talk through a few of the most common questions we get from members, and then we have some questions from our audience as well. So the first question here, and it's a tough one, Deborah. How should HR handle formal employee complaints against the CEO when the board is made up of community volunteers with limited HR expertise?
Yeah, this is such a good question. And actually, I spent more time thinking about this question than I did any of the others for this conversation, right? Because I really wanted to serve the audience in a way that would be helpful. And I thought, I'm not an HR expert, but I am an expert on how boards operate. And so I was thinking about this from the board perspective of how can an HR leader be successful in navigating this? Because this is a high stakes issue, because if you fail, the CEO is probably going to fire you. Mm-hmm. And so how do you navigate this without getting fired, right? You can't miss. And so as I thought about that, here's what I would suggest. It starts with alignment with the board chair. You can't go to the whole board and say, so-and-so's committed misconduct, right? Mm-hmm. You have to have alignment with the board chair, and that's a one-to-one conversation. That's not something you drop in the middle of a board meeting, because anything big that happens in a board meeting has been shopped around to the board members before it ever hits the table or the agenda. And that's the way you need to think about this too. So number one, have alignment with the board chair. Number two, bring in outside counsel, because they will lead the investigation in a way that you won't have to, and it keeps you a little bit more insulated from that. And we need to focus on bringing in outside counsel that can have the outside perspective to navigate the process and be that source of truth and advising to the board, where it doesn't necessarily have to be you.
Brilliant. How should HR respond when the board requests access to confidential exit interview information for C-suite staff, balancing governance and privacy concerns?
Yeah, I thought about this one too. It's interesting because going back to the very beginning of this conversation, I want to remind people of the role of the board. Their legal obligation is to protect the company and to protect the financial and future interests of the business. They are legally obligated. So if they have an issue at the highest level, at the C-suite level, and they ask for these things, it's because this is their job. So as I was thinking about this, if the board is asking for sensitive information, sensitive data, as long as it is legal data to provide, so I'm not talking patient stuff, things like that, but if it's legal to provide, privacy concerns are not, we've moved past that, right? And it's going to be, as I was thinking about, okay, how do you manage working with the board and not get fired? As long as it's legal information to share, we really do need to give that to the board.
Okay. Thank you. What advice do you have for CHROs and HR leaders who present to the board? What should they keep in mind to build confidence with this audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So board members it's a weird group, right? Because everybody at the table doesn't work at the company, but they have a deep interest in the company or organization or whatever it may be. And they all come from different backgrounds. They have different specialties. So it's not like everyone is a CFO or everyone is legal. Everyone's going to have a little bit different focus. But what we want to do, what we do know in the way the board works, is that we want to give clear information. So if you're presenting to the board, keep it short, keep it high level focus. Don't go into the details. They don't care about the details. It's not their job to care about the details. They want to know high level, stay high level. If you were going to show 10 slides, show 5, right? Because they can ask follow-up questions. So I'm not saying don't know 10 slides worth of content. Don't share 10 slides worth of content, share the 5, and they can ask follow-up questions. Don't answer questions that weren't asked. And this is just for you to know, not what the board wants you to hear. But if they didn't ask, you don't need to tell them, friends. We don't need to open cans of worms we don't necessarily want to open. And remember, at the end of the day, this board member, all of these people around the table are just humans. They're just people. And I think sometimes, we talk about it as the board, and people get a little bit worked up and they're like, oh my God, but the board members, they're so high up. They do these things. They're on this. They're just humans. doing the craziest things I've ever seen. You know, Carmen and I on who's in the chat, and I work with board candidates all day, every day. And I need you to know, come at it from a human perspective and you'll be fine.
Okay, I love that. Human perspective. What separates the HR leaders who land board seats from the ones who stay stuck in the pipeline?
Two things. It is the ones that lean on only their people, talent, DEI, expertise that really struggle to land a seat, because there is typically only one seat at a board table for a CHRO. And sometimes not even that. Right now, we've seen talent and people development falling off of board skills matrices for public companies. That's a whole different conversation we could talk about, but it's less desirable. And so you have much less opportunity. So really leaning into your business first, governance first acumen will really help you stand out. And the other thing is knowing that it's a long process. I think, you know, some people think, well, you know, I've got 30 years of experience and I was this and I was that, and I'm just going to get a board seat. It is a long process. Unless something falls in your lap that is, you know, serendipitous, going through a formal board search, we tell our clients, is usually 18 months to 2-year process. Okay. It takes effort. It's hard. If it weren't hard, everybody would do it. And so we need to get off the start line and focus and build that momentum.
Love it. And amongst this plethora of amazing information you've shared with us, what is one takeaway that you want the audience to remember?
I want the audience to remember, and I know I've said it twice, but it literally is the absolute most important part that everyone skips, or it's too hard, so they don't want to do it, is you have to have a hyper focus. You really do, because it impacts every single aspect of your search. And so without that, you're really going to be, trudging uphill and not getting the traction that you want to see in your search. And so I know we've talked about it a couple of times. It is the biggest difference maker, though. I'm doing a masterclass later today, and it is only on. Everyone stuck with me for an hour and a half to build this, because it is what is most important in the search.
Thanks for tuning in. You could follow the People in Strategy podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also, podcast reviews have a real impact on podcast visibility. So if you enjoyed today's episode, leave a review to help others find the show. Finally, you could find all our episodes on our website at shrm.org/podcasts. And while you're there, sign up for our weekly newsletter. Thanks for joining us, and have a great day.
SHRM.